We shall commence this module by discussing about the famous economist Malthus. Thomas Robert Malthus was the first economist who analyzed the problem of population growth. In other words, he was the first economist to study the demographic issues. He propounded the theory of population in his famous book titled as An Essay on the Principle of Population in the year 1798. In the 18th century, he conducted an extensive study on population growth in different countries of Europe. His study showed a rapid increase in the population of these countries, and this became a cause of concern for him. He felt that the future of human race is in great danger, and so he laid stress on the need to keep population under strict control. This approach was presented in his book known as the Malthusian theory of population. After studying this module, you shall be able to express the role of effective demand for economic growth, explain the relation between increase in population and economic growth, appreciate the role of capital investment in the industrial production, and importance of land reforms. Let us first discuss about the Malthusian theory of population. The salient feature of the theory of population given by T.R. Malthus can be summarized in the following points. First, food grains are produced under the law of diminishing returns. That is, according to Malthus, nature is considered to be miser. This implies that if man tries to produce more food grains, he would not be accompanied by the sympathy and cooperation of nature. As he uses more and more unit of capital and labor on land, total production would increase undoubtedly. However, due to the applicability of law of diminishing returns on land, it would result in diminishing growth of food grains. Thus, as Malthus stated earlier, food supply increases in arithmetical progression, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so on. Second, unchecked population increases much faster than the growth of food supply. That is, according to Malthus, population has a universal tendency to increase in geometrical progression, that is 1, 2, 4, 8, 10, 32, 64, etc. It implies that the rate of growth of population is more than the rate of growth in food supply. It is also observed that population tends to double in every 25 years. Third, the above mentioned two features of Malthusian theory of population implies that food supply and population growth are affected by some independent variables. Since food supply is influenced by law of diminishing returns and population is affected by human fecundity, these can be considered as one of the independent variables. This entails the initiation of a race between food supply and population growth. Food supply is, however, unable to compete in this race according to its nature of growth, that is arithmetic progression, and thus lags behind the growth rate of human population. Now, this results into the existence of imbalance between food supply and population growth. Fourth, the existence of imbalance between the supply of food grains and the growth rate of population makes it difficult for the state to feed its increasing population at the present level. This difficulty emerges because the increase in population growth is much faster than the growth of food grains, as the growth rate of former follows the geometric progression, while for the latter it is the arithmetic progression. The paucity of food grains not only leads to the problem of starvation, but also likely to aggravate the level of malnutrition among human population at a large scale. Also, the occurrence of natural calamities such as drought, epidemics, flood, earthquake, war, etc. takes away a huge toll on human lives. Malthus called these natural calamities as positive or natural checks on the growth rate of human population. Consequently, once again there is a balance being established between food supply and population at the present level. The reason for calling these population checks as natural checks is that the checks are not imposed by human race. Rather, the nature on its own imposes these checks on growth rate of human population. The objective of these checks imposed by nature is to bring equilibrium between food supply and population growth. It is, however, worth to remember that nature imposes these checks only when man fails to control the rapid growth in its population. Fifth, according to Malthus, man can save himself from natural checks by adopting preventive checks. Preventive checks, as opposite to natural checks, are man-made checks. Among the preventive checks, the following can be considered as some of the important preventive checks. First, celibacy. Second, abstinence. Third, postponement of marriages. Fourth, moral restraint. These checks are known as preventive checks as these checks control the growth rate of human population by delaying or preventing childbearing. If man on his own applies these preventive checks on himself, then there is no need of nature to impose its natural checks to control the growth rate of human population. An equilibrium will thus be established between the availability of food supply and population growth. Hence, nature does not require to implement any of its natural checks. It is, however, worth to notice that Malthus had given priority to preventive checks rather than giving importance to natural checks. Among the preventive checks as suggested by Malthus, we cannot find the mention of contraceptive methods or artificial methods of birth control. The reason for the exclusion of these methods of birth control from Malthus' preventive checks lies in the fact that in the 18th century, these kind of artificial preventive methods were not known to the society. These methods were evolved in the later decades. Next, we shall discuss the diagrammatic presentation of Malthus' theory. The Malthusian theory of population can be understood with the help of the flowchart. That is, the theory of population increases in a geometric progression, that is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64 and so on, and the supply of food grains increases in arithmetic progression, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and so on. This creates an imbalance between the supply of food grains and the level of population. This imbalance can be further removed by the mechanisms, either by natural and positive checks, that is floods, epidemics, wars, earthquakes, droughts, etc., or by preventive checks, that is celibacy, postponement of marriages, moral restraint, abstinence. T.R. Malthus commences his theory with the assumption that growth rate of human population follows the path of geometric progression and the rate of food grains follows arithmetic progression. Owing to the differences in the growth rate, there arises a situation of disequilibrium between the two, and as a result, food supply tends to fall shorter than its demand by rapidly increasing human population. In this scenario, there arises the prevalence of undernutrition among the population due to inadequacy of food grains. The situation can further get worse and may lead to starvation on a large scale. Therefore, it becomes imperative to bring the growth rate of human population under strict control. Malthus suggested two mechanisms through which human population can be brought under control and the initial equilibrium between the supply of food grains and population growth rate can be restored once again. He named the two mechanisms as natural and positive checks and preventive checks. He believed that in a situation of imbalance, natural calamities such as droughts, floods, earthquakes, outbreak of wars, etc., that takes away a heavy toll of human lives would occur, thereby reducing the human population to a great extent. The reduced human population would now again be in equilibrium with the supply of food grains. One point worth mentioning here is that humans have no control on the occurrence of these natural calamities. Apart from the natural checks, there are some other checks also that are to be observed by human population, and these can certainly prevent the rapid increase in the growth rate of human population. Malthus termed these checks as preventive checks. Since these checks have to be observed by human population, therefore, these are termed as man-made checks, unlike the natural checks which are beyond human control. He talked about celibacy, postponement of marriages, moral restraint, abstinence, etc. among the preventive checks. The natural checks do not affect the rate of growth of human population, rather these checks increase the rate of mortality among the humans to avoid further rise in the level of population. Preventive checks on the contrary affects the fertility level of human population and thereby keeping a check on its growth rate rather than influencing the mortality levels. Moving on to discuss the criticism of Malthusian theory of population. The theory of population as propounded by T.R. Malthus has indeed given a new direction to the field of research. Prior to Malthus, none of the economists analyzed the issue of population as done by him. However, similarly to many other theories, this theory of population growth was also criticized by researchers based on certain grounds. A few criticisms of Malthusian theory of population are given. First, the mathematical form of Malthusian theory of population is objectionable. That is, Malthus developed his theory of population growth based on the premise that population increases in geometric progression, while the growth rate of food grains follow the path of arithmetic progression. And due to this difference, an imbalance gets established between the supply of food grains and population at the present level. Many researchers, however, did not agree to this mathematical form of Malthusian theory. It is wrong to assume that population increases by geometric progression and food grain by arithmetic progression. And unfortunately, Malthus could not provide any evidence or argument in order to provide a support to this mathematical form of growth rate of population and food grains. The second criticism is that Malthus was not the supporter of scientific innovation. That is, T.R. Malthus believed that when there is an imbalance between the supply of food grains and population growth, then either the natural checks or preventive checks would come in action to bring about the equilibrium between the two once again. He, however, completely ignored the role of scientific innovations. It is not compulsory that the desired equilibrium would always be established by natural or preventive checks. The scientific innovations can lead to improvement in technology of production that can enhance the supply of food grains, or it can also develop some methods apart from the ones suggested by Malthus that can keep a check on the growth rate of human population. Therefore, scientific innovations can play a decisive role in ensuring and maintaining the level of equilibrium between the supply of food grains and the growth rate of population. Third, population growth according to Malthus was related to production of food grain and not with the total production. That is, Malthus confined himself with the growth rate of food production rather than extending it to include the level of total production while explaining the linkage between the growth rate of human population. The society is so well integrated that it becomes difficult to justify the exclusion of total production while establishing the equilibrium between supply of food grains only and human population. Fourth, population is not controlled by the method of moral restraint only. That is, Malthus talked about two types of checks on the growth rate of population, that is, natural checks and preventive checks. Among the preventive checks, he considered moral restraint as one of the methods of controlling the growth rate of human population. And Malthus is indeed very much correct in his approach. However, moral restraint is one of the methods but not the only method of birth control. There are several other methods that can be put into practice to control the growth rate of human population. Unfortunately, Malthusian theory of population did not talk about such methods of population control. Fifth, population growth is not always harmful. That is, Malthus assumed that the rapid increase in the growth rate of human population compared to the growth rate of food grains is a cause of concern. This assumption underlines the fact that increase in population growth is not beneficial, and this approach thus forms the ground for criticism. It is not justified to analyze the increase in population level from the consumption point of view always. One should, however, not forget that population is required to carry out the productive activities as it brings into play the other factors of production. It is therefore not the size of population which is a reason for worry, rather it should be the quality of human population which seeks attention of policymakers. Sixth, it is not necessary that natural calamities will always occur in overpopulated countries. Malthus believed that the imbalance between the supply of food grains and the growth rate of population can be corrected by natural calamities that takes away a heavy toll on human lives. This reflects the belief of Malthus that wherever population growth rate will exceed the growth rate of food grains, nature through its agent will bring about a fall in population of that state up to a level where it can be equated with the total production of food grains. This assumption in itself is quite absurd to believe, as natural calamities can occur in any part of the world. These calamities are not governed by the size of population, rather by human activities that intervene with the nature. It is, however, not compulsory that nature will take out its revenge only at the place where it has been intervened. Natural calamities are thus beyond the human control and can occur even in less populated countries of the world. Let us now summarize what we have discussed in this module. Thomas Robert Malthus argued in his theory of population that production of food grains increases in arithmetic progression while population multiplies in geometric progression. As a result, after a certain span of time, human population will eventually exceed the production of food grains. This would bring disequilibrium between the supply of food grain and population. Therefore, it becomes imperative to bring back the equilibrium between the two. According to Malthus, the equilibrium can be restored by keeping the increase in population under strict control. Further, he suggested two types of checks on population growth, that is, natural or positive check and preventive checks. The former affects the death and mortality rate, while the latter keeps an eye on the fertility levels of the population. Malthus, however, ignored various other factors that play a vital role in determining the equilibrium level of production of food grains and population growth, such as scientific innovations. Further, there is no deny in the fact that natural calamities takes a heavy toll on human lives, but since these calamities are beyond human control, it would not be wrong to assume that occurrence of natural calamities would be in overpopulated countries. Also, it is also necessary that increase in the levels of population will always be harmful for the society. population increase is indeed required for the development of any society. Therefore, Malthusian theory of population, though suffers from certain limitations, it is indeed a masterpiece of work which has given a new direction to the field of research. He gathered the attention of researchers towards the issue of population growth.